Michael, we'd like to start with you. Let's talk about the rules and regulations of FIFA. Take us through where are the restricted areas? How restricted are they, and how are they determined?
Look, there's two concepts you must keep very clear in your mind when you talk about restrictions. There are restrictions which are area-based, so there are certain areas which are set aside where to advertise at all, to put up a sign, to maintain a sign, and sign is incredibly widely defined. So any form of advertising would fall within that concept. In certain areas you need to apply for event-specific consent. If you don't have event-specific consent, you can't put up or maintain a sign in those areas.
But let's say
and I think to a great extent people don't appreciate that. So, because that doesn't matter whether you are marketing or advertising around the event, whether you're saying anything about football or the event, you have to get this consent. Then there's a separate category of restrictions, let's say, which are content-based, and those relate to if your advertising is of such a type as to be held by a court or other tribunal to be ambush marketing. So you've got two types of prohibition. One is area-related, but you can get consent if you've got the right sort of advertising, and the other is content-related, which is what we all know as ambush marketing.
So now we know that there are restricted roads as well, Carni, and no advertising can take place on these particular roads. So that affects the outdoor industry. How are you guys going forward with this?
Well, it affects us in quite a big way, because if we don't have prior consent, then that means you can't advertise, and that goes for all brands, not just competitive or non-sponsors and non-competitive non-sponsors. So if you are a brand like Tastic, you still have to have that prior consent to get the right to advertise. So that is quite concerning for us, because we don't want to be a week before the event and then all of a sudden we have to take down 50 sites, which will affect a lot of people's revenues and not just ours. It would affect the media agency, it would affect ours, it would affect all the suppliers, the landlords. So we've got a long chain of people who would really lose out if that has to happen.
And who absorbs the cost? Is it the client or is it the media owner?
Well, the client loses exposure, so that's the cost that they would lose. And we would lose actual monetary revenue. And there is no compensation for that, and that's what we are really concerned about. So give us enough time and we can plan it. And we're not saying we want to disrupt the process. We're just saying we want to know now so that we can plan ahead.
From an agency point of view, how does it affect you?
Well, two points of view. We have clients that are sponsors, therefore they have all the rules and regulations. So we understand what we need to do in what areas. So that's one area. We have no problem with that. But obviously we've got a lot of clients that are not sponsors of the World Cup. And to those clients we say, you have the rest of the country to advertise. It's not only about the restricted areas. So we've developed those strategies, we've developed those areas. We know that people are going to be watching the World Cup, but they're also going to be traveling in the country. So we've developed strategies to make sure that they're outside of the restricted areas.
Can you give us some examples of that? Not partner related and maybe non-partner related.
For example, if you take tourism, we know that a lot of people are going to come into the country, watch the games, and then go off to some of our great tourist destinations. So we do work outside there. We know that there are a lot of spouses that are going to be following some of either the guys that are watching or the men that are playing. We have a lot of programs for spouses and what we call wives and girlfriends. Those are way outside the stadium areas and all those restricted areas. Fantastic programs on what to do during the games when there are no games happening at that time. So yes, those are some of the strategies that we're putting in front of our clients.
And Michael, when are these regulations likely to be enforced?
Well, you've got different categories of rule, let's say. The content-based rules are already in place. There are national laws which deal with ambush marketing, and there's the Advertising Standards Authority codes, and those are already in place. The area-based restrictions, it's a bit uneven. So in some cities, because these area-based restrictions are imposed by bylaws which are passed by municipalities. So in Cape Town, for instance, they're already in place in certain respects. There are parts that still have to be promulgated, but in general they're in place. Johannesburg is a bit behind. The term hasn't yet been promulgated, and neither have certain of the the zones. Which the two main catchphrases which you'll hear people talk about are controlled access sites and exclusion zones. And although you can get a sense, if you read the bylaw, let's say Johannesburg, you can get a sense of what kind of area you're talking about. They haven't specifically set out, a sort of a map which you can point to and say, well, that's the law. So one would hope pretty soon. I mean, the Cape Town one, when it came out, actually had the period in it already, and that's from 21 April, through the period of the World Cup and after it. But as I say, in Johannesburg, it's not yet. We don't know. The term has not yet been promulgated.
Michael, let's say I'm an owner of a fast food company, and it's in competition with McDonald's, who is a partner, and I'm in a restricted area, but I've been there for the last 20 years. And how do I go about my business? And if it doesn't pass the law and they ask me to take off my signage, who does the onus lie with in terms of the cost of doing that? How are those people affected?
Well, I was listening to Carni earlier talking about all the different levels of person that are affected, and it's important, I think, for people out there to realise that apart from I'll answer your question directly in a moment, but apart from the rules, the laws, let's say, you should also be looking at your contracts, depending where you are in that chain, because you should regulate these things by contract. You asked the question, who pays? Is it the client? Well, a lot of that might be regulated in the agreement that's concluded at the various levels. But to answer directly, it's very important for people out there to always keep clear in their minds that you've got the area-related prohibitions and the content-related. And why I say that is because all of these bylaws provide that if you fall into a restricted area, so an exclusion zone or a controlled access site, you need to apply for approval, event-specific approval. So it's not enough if you've got a general approval, to advertise there or put up a sign there. You need to apply for event-specific approval. And it's going to be interesting to see how those are dealt with by the municipal authorities. Do they have the capacity to deal with them, and what kind of test will they apply? I would say, because this is South Africa and we have the Constitution and we've got administrative justice rights and rights to a fair hearing, that those tests would include things like, if you've been there for 20 years before, well, clearly you're not, an ambush marketer or anything like that, because, at the heart of all these prohibitions, although the zones, as I say, or the areas are declared, well, that's the area and you must apply for consent, it's all aimed at preventing ambush marketing. So it can't go too far, in my view. It's got to be limited to what is necessary to stop ambush marketing. And where the conduct in question is clearly not ambush marketing, they should give you consent. But you need to know what the bylaw says in your area. You need to make application timelessly. And to put it bluntly, you need to read these bylaws and understand what they mean.
If you're found doing all of this, could you end up in jail possibly?
Is there a criminal offence?
Michael's probably best, but from what I know is you can get fined. The amounts would differ between whether you have infringed on the content or on the area. But there is definitely, you can get to a criminal offence as well. But I don't think FIFA has gone the criminal route yet. It's generally settled and said, okay, no, we understand, and we understand your point of view that we can't use the 2010 phrase.
It's very
and we
clear,
can't,
isn't it? The rules and regulations are actually very clear.
Yeah.
And
when it comes to the content side, it's very clear.
That's it, yes.
I think that's where creativity comes in. Let's not look at the trademarks and try and use the trademarks.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. But there are ways of talking about everything else without being specifically using the trademark.
And that's where your job
That's
comes
where
in.
creativity comes in, and that's where we have to
And
find ways and means.
A lot of brands have used the whole spirit aspect of it. Get behind your team and be the supporter, not necessarily relating to soccer. It's just get behind the spirit of your team, and that team could be anything. But obviously, we all know 2010 is here, and it's a very exciting event.
Of course.
So you sort of make
Lots to
that,
look forward to.